Thanks for tuning in to another edition of Another Dolphins podcast. The Miami Dolphins haven't played in nearly a month, but we still have plenty to talk about. Believe it or not, Tyreek Hill is playing Fortnite. Jonnu Smith is headed to the Pro Bowl, and the coaching carousel keeps on moving. But Josh, the divisional round's in the book. The championship round is in the book. And all I got to say, man, wouldn't it be so cool if the Dolphins were in a spot where the missing piece was, let's add 260-pound Saquon Barkley to go run over everyone and run us to a Super Bowl. How cool would that be to build a roster like that?
It'd be amazing, but some people might call us, casuals and say that that's the Madden thinking. But, I mean, I think a lot of us would have loved to have Saquon Barkley and what he's doing. He's playing out of his mind. But, Jake, I do have to mention, you and I, before this whole thing started, I think we both might have picked the Eagles to win the entire thing. So we still have our pony in this race. But what were your thoughts overall of the championship games? Because, like you mentioned, man, it has been so long since the Dolphins have even sniffed a game of this caliber. We can't even get in the playoffs. So I'll never know what it's like to be able to sit back and view this as a fan. But what were your thoughts just enjoying football this past weekend, Jake?
It was football in its purest form. It was run the ball, play good defense, hold on to the ball. Those were the keys to winning in championship round weekend. I thought it was pretty interesting that the Commanders, with only 99 rushing yards, was the only team that didn't reach 135 rushing yards on the day. You saw, Josh, I think what hurt the Commanders was the turnovers. I think they had 3 fumbles in the game. And obviously, when I think it was as close as 14-12 between the Commanders and Eagles. But when you're turning over the ball that much, you're not going to be running the football enough. And that was pretty much that. So I got to thinking, my hamster wheel got going on here, Josh. I'm like, can the Miami Dolphins do this? Like I think one of the conversations that's happening on Twitter, happening on X, happening on podcasts is, can the Dolphins compete in these type of games? What do you think?
I mean, I would love to sit here and say yes. I mean, I think if everything goes, and it sounds so cliche, right? If we can, stay ahead of the 8 ball with the injuries, continue to play the way this team that we've seen before, I mean, I think they could, but I just feel like being that fan, the guy that's been sitting here for 30 plus years. I mean, Jake, you've been here for, 20 plus years. We're all just sitting here waiting for something to happen, and it's not happened. So I just don't know if it's even possible as a Dolphins fan until I see it with my own 2 eyes. But we have seen this team time and time again compete with some of the Josh Allen and the Bills, the Chiefs at one point. Tua Tagovailoa was throwing the Lynn Bowden, and Isaiah Ford his rookie year, and he was going, for lack of a better word, toe-to-toe with Patrick Mahomes. So we've seen it done before, but I just feel like the Dolphins, as you see, the longer we get into the postseason, it just seems like they're that much further apart than the rest of these guys that are playing, in the most meaningful game of the entire season.
Is it the movie Interstellar that a lot of people use as like a meme where it's basically someone who's in a spacesuit, he's banging on the window and he's basically seeing him like 20 years ago, and he's just trying to like warn him, and you see him crying and kind of screaming, no, don't leave, things like that. Is that's Interstellar, right?
I think it is. I mean, yeah, I'm pretty sure.
That's me looking at the 2023 Miami Dolphins, Josh. Because when I look at the 2024 Dolphins, they ain't running for 135 yards. More on that later. But man, when I think, can this Dolphins team have a run-first mindset and win a football game like this? The second half of that Kansas City game in Germany, Raheem Mostert was running over everyone. And I'm not here to say that 2 years later, that the Dolphins can still be that team with Raheem Mostert being that guy. But Josh, it is so, I'm sitting there banging on the window because I saw the vision. Like you see, I'm banging on the window as Bradley Chubb slams his helmet on the ground in that Titans game, because I just was watching these games. I'm like, man, that team 2 years ago, that team competes. That team, I think, was built and headed in the right direction before, obviously, you could get into the whole soft conversation and the wheels fell out. You lose, up 3 games in the division with 5 to play. The Dolphins had it made, and I think they would have been able to play in these type of games. Would they have been able to win them? Dude, it's Patrick Mahomes. I'm not going to say yes, but in order to compete and understand the game script and Mike McDaniel have a plan in place where they could really try to, all right, we got to play clean football. We got to run the football. That's great. I got into a little argument. I lost followers on this because of this, Josh. I remember on Twitter when Tua came back, it was like his first 3 games, he threw the ball like a total of 120 times and there was no interceptions. It was incredible. It was awesome. And everyone was like, yeah, you can win like this. He's not turning the ball over. And my argument was like, okay, 120 times. Are you telling me none of those were dropped interceptions? And people were like, well, every quarterback's going to have dropped interceptions, yada, yada. But my point was, if you put the ball in the air 40 times, you're opening it up to mistakes. You're opening up downfield issues. I think Patrick Mahomes, man, passed for like 250 yards, and over 200 of them were yak yards after the catch. It's just having the plan in place. It's not like I think the Chiefs ran the same wheel, like a fake handoff. Then Patrick Mahomes just run up the side like 6 different times. You don't need to have these massive explosive plays. What you need is to not turn the football over. And what we saw with the Dolphins late this season, when you're throwing the ball 40 times, man, you might get lucky. A couple interceptions might get dropped, but then you see it later in the season. Derek Stingley, Houston Texans intercept him 3 times. It's not a sustainable way to win football games. So the 2024 team, long-winded way of saying, God, no, absolutely get boat raced. But the 2023, man, the way things are kind of building and coming together, I could entertain that team could compete in the playoffs.
Yeah, and I mean, it's kind of crazy, right? Because we brought in this run game coordinator from the San Francisco 49ers, and we all thought, okay, he was going to, build that line, build the trenches, run the football, and become that sort of style of football team. And it was kind of a little bit of the complete opposite. So can we agree, Jake, after watching these games? And I mean, we're getting to that age where we can admit you build in the trenches. That is how you have success. But can you and I both agree we'd much rather be this, physical, dominant team that can bully a team up front and, run the ball and do things like that than that gimmicky team that's, dropping – although dropping 70 points on the Broncos was nice, but man, we just got to find
that team that scored 70 points ran the football very well too. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there because it was that 2023 team, man. That was like our chance. You feel like that was the window. To all the people, all 2024, the Dolphins just need to establish the run. They just need to run the football and they'll be good. Josh, the Miami Dolphins averaged 105 rushing yards per game. And this is where my hamster wheel started going of if the 2024 team could compete a game where you got to run the football, you got to take care of the football. The Dolphins averaged 105 rushing yards per game. Devon Achane did not break 100 rushing yards until week 16. The Miami Dolphins went 15 games before having a 100-yard rusher. But Josh, we have a backup quarterback in. Let's establish the run, man. We know what we're doing here. The Dolphins ran for over 135 yards. Pretty good. That's 30 yards over the average, Josh. 7 times. If you rush for 135 yards, do you think you'd be winning a football game? Would you think that if you did that 7 times, you'd at least be over 500?
Yes.
The Dolphins running the ball for over at least 135 yards, because I think week 18 against the Jets, they hit it exactly. 2-5. When the Dolphins established the run, they were 2-5. Buffalo week 2, L. Patriots week 5, we got that dub. Colts week 6, L. Cardinals week 8, L. Buffalo Bills week 9, L. The crippled San Francisco 49ers, we got that dub. But then the Jets again in week 18. So, dude, that blew my mind. Seeing that the Dolphins, when you established the run, were 2-5, dude. And don't get me wrong, those were still close games, but what are we doing here, man?
Yeah, that throws everything out the window. I'm in disbelief. I don't know how to, wrap my mind around that, because you would think, like you said, man, when you're rushing the ball for 135 yards, I mean, you should be able to put those games away. But I guess that's so Dolphins, man. This is how painful it is to be a Dolphins fan, if you didn't already know.
And that's just how hard it is to digest the 2024 season, because there were so many different things going wrong at so many different times, where there isn't just like Mike McDaniel should be doing this. There were so many things wrong. And I guess we're going to spend, Josh, 6 months talking ourselves in that the Dolphins are going to have this fixed. Something I thought that was a little interesting about championship round weekend, Josh. Let's say you had a pretty long NFL career and you were debating retirement. Would you be, if you were in Teron Armstead's shoes, would you, if you are about to retire, he kind of did a long post, like, I think it was year 13's in the books. It was a great ride. More to come. Stay tuned was his final message to fans. You think he'd be going to retire if he posted after the Bills lost, just like a laughing emoji? Do you think that sounds like someone who's ready to hang up the cleats?
No, especially when we really haven't had much success against him, right? Like, I mean, he has to be snickering about the future, right? So I hope that means he's coming back. But then we have a whole nother issue and how that affects the salary cap. And, we want Patrick Paul in there. But, dude, we said before, we'd welcome him back in open arms, because when he's out there, he's an absolute mammoth. So I think it means he might be coming back, but a little bit too soon. But I'm sure someone's out there, sources are saying Teron Armstead's coming back based off that one little tweet.
And yeah, it's not news. It's literally just a tweet. But as we sit here on January 28th, we're looking for any type of tea leaf to follow. Josh, is the NFL rigged?
I hope not. This was a discussion before, right? I think it was after, was it 2000 or something like that? The Patriots won. I think a lot of people started to snowball in there. I hope not, Jake. Please tell me it's not.
Do you know how hard it is to keep a lie, or like keep a secret between 5 people, let alone a
Right.
multi-billion-dollar industry? And I think Nick Wright said it best, where he's like, "Yeah, we're all gonna agree. Let's give it to the Chiefs again this year." It's like, I think when you look at that Bills game, I thought it was a great game. One, let's start with that tush push. I think what was it? It was 4th and short, and then there was a review, and it was deemed that the Chiefs didn't get it, and then there was a camera view that showed that the Bills might have gotten it. I don't think they got it, Josh. I think that way the angles of the cameras are set up, I think that plays a big role. On top of that, man, they ran that tush push like 6 times, and you faced Kansas City in this spot before. When it's 4th and 2 and you need 2 yards, shouldn't you, like, it's the playoffs. Like, I still have in my Twitter bio that Ben Roethlisberger fumbled, I think it's like October 17th or something, 2010. These minor details happen in every game where you could debate either side. If you need 2 yards, Josh, Buffalo should have gotten 3. I think that's just like in the playoffs, on the road, in Kansas City. I think even if you were in New England, if you're a Pittsburgh team led by Ben Roethlisberger 8 years ago, you need 3 yards. I think that it's just football, man. I think the Chiefs do such a great job of identifying game script and understanding how long each drive takes and how long a game is and how that impacts the final outcome. I just think, man, you just got to get that 3rd yard. And they just kept doing the same play over and over again.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's because I'm older or what, but I'm just so sick of seeing the tush push, right? I mean, it's all the Eagles do when they get in the goal line. I mean, that affected Saquon Barkley's fantasy value a little bit. But in those situations, man, like let Josh Allen, run power or something or do anything other than just trying to tush push. I mean, it did not work. I think a lot of people were upset with maybe the play before that. I think they should have probably challenged that spot. He might have got the 1st down, the 3rd down call on the 4th down. Obviously,
yeah.
if they call out in the field that he was short, I don't think there was enough evidence to overturn it. So it's all they're going to talk about. We'd probably be making up excuses too if the Dolphins were in that situation. And to be honest, it felt pretty good to see the Bills fall apart again. I mean, I kind of feel bad a little bit, but at the same time, man, you don't, right? I mean, they've been there 4 times they got bounced by the Chiefs in the last 5 years, I think it was. So I don't know, man. They've been our daddy, but it was nice to see them fall and to feel a little bit of the same pain that we have, even though not quite nearly as bad.
And I think any close football game, man, and I think as Dolphin fans, like every year when we're in the hunt and you finish the year 8-8, 7-9, whatever it may be, like you can go back, man, to 3-4 of those losses. If it's a 1-score game, you can take a highlighter and pick out 3 plays like the refs messed us there, or this drop changes everything. And I think that's just football. And when you have the entire world watching strictly one game, you're just going to have those debates on a much larger scale where obviously people who just want to stomach it, it's rigged, that type of thing. But man, I love football. What a great weekend. That was just an absolute fun weekend of football, and I'm glad we got to enjoy one more good weekend.
Yeah, and you really don't have any true. I mean, we wanted to see the Bills lose, but we really didn't have a horse in the race. And one thing that stood out to me, Jake, and I still can't believe it, was that 4th down play. I mean, Josh Allen literally just YOLO'd that thing, and it somehow almost was caught by Dalton Kincaid. So close, man. And that's just what it takes, I guess, in the NFL. It's just a matter of inches, right? I mean, Spagnuolo drew up the perfect blitz in the face of that. I know some people are going back and forth on whether he should have dumped it off, but at the end of the day, man, he still made a play that was almost caught. So absolutely alien-like. And then I also had written down Fangio, man. He's going to the Super Bowl. He should have been the one kicking rocks. Maybe not Javon Holland, right?
Yeah, you do want it, but I mean, to be fair, he always did want to be in Philly. I think it does fit a lot of the soft narrative, and I think a lot of the soft narrative is true. But at the end of the day, he wanted to be there. I think that's kind of the end all be all. It stinks. It stings. It's a bummer. Josh, is it fair for me to be upset about the fact that the Dolphins drafted Cam Smith in the 2nd round when Vic Fangio was here? The Dolphins let Vic Fangio go. He goes to Philadelphia. Cooper DeJean and Quinyon Mitchell.
Yeah.
I got that right. Okay, yeah. Sorry, long day. They're both on the all Pro Football Writers of America all rookie team. Like, that bothers me a little bit more than the fact he went to Philly. That kind of just like you can't build this guy up a little bit while you're here, forget rookies, even though you had Bonner playing there to the year, and then you have these two young guys in their secondary. Now, that I think bothers me more than the fact that he left. That makes it seem like when he was here, it was like a wasted draft pick, whether it was Greer and then not talking to him not saying what he really meant or felt, and then just not playing. It felt that bothered me more than I think even, I don't know why, but
No, I get it, and we're still waiting, right? We're still waiting for Cam Smith to do anything and to prove that he can be that guy. So yeah, to see him go on, and then I mean, they were two higher drafted players at the defensive back position as rookies, but Quintanamo Bay, I think is what they nicknamed Quinyon Mitch. That's so sick. There's like shirts and stuff, and then Cooper DeJean, which I think I called him DeJean pre-draft, but yeah, those guys are balling out, and you would like to see at least some of these younger players develop, right? We saw Storm Duck a little bit here. We've heard about Ethan Bonner doing something for the last, how long. We'd love to see somebody develop and to see him go on and just have success, plug and play success almost. It kind of rubs you a little bit the wrong way.
Speaking of rubbing people the wrong way, Tyreek Hill was playing Fortnite. And that's when he decided to acknowledge his end of season comments of "I'm out, dog." Your $30 million wide receiver was playing Fortnite. And what he said is, what all y'all heard at the end of the season was frustration. I've been winning my whole life. I bust my butt every day, so I deserve to feel like that. I deserve to have some sort of opinion. How do you feel that that's his reaction 3 weeks after saying he's out, dog?
I mean, I hate it. I mean, I think we kind of parted ways with him. We were kind of okay, 1 foot out the door by Tyreek Hill, but it just seems like he's almost doubling down. And I'll let you say the rest of this quote, but just to hear what he's saying and to almost say that you didn't have enough players on the team to make this thing work. I mean, we were talking about Jake. 2023 looked magical in hindsight. I mean, that team was great. Even heading in 2024 on paper, we looked awesome. So I don't know how much more quote unquote dogs you need for this thing to take off. But this is not what you wanted to hear. Tyreek Hill playing Fortnite at the end of the year, just bitching about his teammate, but how much of him not getting that wrist injury, Jake, do you think played into the, okay, if you get this wrist injury at the beginning of the year, you can't be playing no video games, man. And he's like, all right, I'll play the whole season. I'll grin and bear.
This is the same. Dude, he had a podcast for all of last year until things went downhill, and then he just disappeared too. Dude, I just don't know. Like, you got the bag. You're making $30 million a year. You understand this franchise invested not only the money, 4 draft picks, 2 firsts, a second, and a fourth, something, X amount of draft picks, where you need to be the guy for multiple years. You're not drafting dogs because you were hired to be like 6 dogs in one. You were hired to be a pack. And instead, it's just, dude, he goes on to say, we got to put pressure on the franchise, like, come on and add some explicitive dogs. It's just so lazy, dude. It's so tone deaf. Like for all the fans that defend him and root for him, like, it's so tone deaf. And all I want to say and all I want to keep telling him for, like, he's a super successful human being. He's made a bunch of money. He's seen more money than I ever seen in my life. All I want him to never forget, above all else, the Kansas City Chiefs don't need him. For the best player in the entire NFL, the Kansas City Chiefs do not need you. And you need to be reminded of that of every single year that you left the team that you thought you supercharged. They do not need you. And if I could do any type of petty business for the rest of my life, it would be to remind Tyreek Hill every day, nah, dude, this Kansas City Chiefs team, they don't need you. You can keep kicking and screaming and causing a scene, and it's doing is reflecting on yourself.
Damn, man, preach. I could not have said it better myself. And it's kind of irritating, right? I mean, it seemed like as soon as he said at the beginning of the year, I'm not going after 2,000 yards, it almost seemed like we got a whole different player, right? And I mean, for hollow stats like that, I mean, you already were number 1 rated player in all of football by your peers, whatever. You, like you mentioned, man, you were signed to be a whole pack of dogs. And late in the year, man, you were, you had no bark. There was your bark was louder than your bite. Yeah, the cat that was chilling behind. That's all you were. So, I think it's beyond repair, though, Jake. I mean, I don't know about you, man. I know that some people can continue to go back and forth. I've seen Omar suggest that they can't trade him because he is their best player, but it sounds like he wanted out back in week whatever. And I just don't know how you bring him back to a fan base where every week he's going to continue to sit here and almost, shit on us one way or the other, right? I mean, it sucks because at one point we were like, okay, this guy's been above all our expectations, this, that, and the other thing. It turns out it was all just, bubbling up in the shadows.
Do you think that's a logical explanation? He's our best player. We can't get rid of him.
No, I mean, especially when you almost, I don't want to say you lost the locker room, but you couldn't even find your players to get them on the right page, right, man? If that's because of Tyreek Hill or whatever it is, I mean, you got to have you got to cut the cancer out, and you got to try to hopefully, build on top of that. The soil, roses will bloom again, whatever Tua said in his bio. But I mean, losing a player of his caliber, I mean, you got to find that playmaker somewhere else, because this offense, Tua Tagovailoa, we've seen it maxed out with weapons, man, and we still fell up short. I mean, that would be a little bit concerning too.
It's January 28th. This is gonna get some of the radio ghosts mad. Who wins in a game? We'll say with Tua in the lineup, so we'll say the Dolphins roster of the Houston Texans game versus the team of 2020, near the end of the season when they were. We'll go the 2022 team when they were getting hot. I know it was, 2021, Brian Flores' last season when they were getting hot. Basically, Josh, I'm fully believe that if you get 22 people, and I don't mean any disrespect, if you get 22 people and there's all 78s in Madden and they're all walking in the same direction, that's so much more powerful than having one guy who, he's our best player. He takes himself off the field. So why does it matter how good he is? So I just think that's such a short-sighted, and I don't know, man. Omar Kelly said the Commanders were getting this far in the playoffs because of Noah Igbenogany and Michael Dieter. So I don't know, man.
'Tis a season. Oh.
That's true. Let's go to some good news here. Jonnu Smith is actually headed to the Pro Bowl. So the Pro Bowl rosters were initially announced. They lacked aqua and orange. Except Travis Kelce, he's going to the Super Bowl without Tyreek Hill. And that means you need a tight end to step up and play in the Pro Bowl. And there is nobody more deserving than someone like Jonnu Smith, who set franchise records in receptions and career records in receptions with 88, receiving yards, 884, and receiving touchdowns, 8. Good to see, Josh. I know there's a lot of bad things about the 2024 Miami Dolphins, but it's nice to get a couple of tips of the cap here.
Yeah, it really is, because this was, I mean, you could see how much it meant to Jonnu Smith. I think there was one point where, he was having his kids and they were trying to, post a video trying to get people to vote for him. And I'm going to be honest, I didn't vote nearly as much as maybe I have in the past, so shame on me. But it was nice to see him become an alternative after having, again, the best season by a Dolphins tight end in franchise history, yards, receptions, touchdowns. And that, I feel like they were just scratching the surface with him. I mean, again, if we get a regular tight end who can block and do things like that, and you can then use Jonnu Smith in different ways, I mean, that could be the way this offense expands. But for year one, we know he's locked up for another year. Jonnu Smith exceeded all expectations, and I think we as fantasy guys probably had pretty high expectations for him, didn't we, Jake?
Absolutely. And there were 2 straight years we had of the Miami Dolphins not using tight ends. Mike Gesicki on the franchise tag getting paid a decent amount of money. I think he was 3rd on the team in receiving yards, but he still wasn't really used this much. We saw Jonnu Smith kind of unlock a new dimension for this Miami Dolphins offense, where at the end of 2023, we did kind of see like, oh man, like we're going to hope the wide receivers do something, especially if we can't run the football. Jonnu Smith helps change that. His 884 receiving yards ranked 4th among tight ends, trailing only Brock Bowers, Trey McBride, and George Kittle. He and Kittle were tied for 2nd among all tight ends with 8 touchdowns, trailing only Mark Andrews. And God, man, I think the most impressive stat of them all, he averaged over 5 receptions and 50 yards per game with an impressive 80% catch percentage, despite working with 4 different quarterbacks throughout the year. I don't know if we can technically count Tim Boyle, but I did.
No, I like that. Tim Boyle counts. He definitely counts. I mean, I think another thing that's being lost, and I wish I had it in front of me, but some of these catches were pretty big, like 4th down catches, conversions like that. And it just seemed like him and Tua, their chemistry all season long, just, when Tua was out there, it looked like it was on another level. Maybe it was from Moana, whatever it was. But I really felt like it was nice to get Jonnu Smith in this game, although I don't know about you, Jake. I don't even know if I'll be watching it, right? Like, don't they just play is it flag football now? I can't even remember.
The last Pro Bowl I watched was the Brandon Marshall game. And then you trade him like 3 days later. Oh, that was gross. Yeah, I remember I was watching it when I was like 12 and I was kind of interested. Like, I'm like, yeah, it's Zach Thomas, it's Jason Taylor. And then my dad was like, eh. And when he goes about Dolphin players playing, I'm like, all right, yeah, no, there's no reason to be watching this. Let's try to tie these two things together a little bit. So Tyreek Hill, your best player. When you have an offense that's evolving, like I think Dustin, when he was on last week, I think he did a great job explaining how we have seen this offense evolve. They struggled to run the football. I think that had a lot to do with being in the trenches. But Josh, when the Dolphins needed a 1st down, they needed a touchdown, they always found a way to get the ball to Jonnu Smith, where in past years where it was Tyreek in that situation, it wasn't always simple. So when you see this offense with Jonnu Smith involved, Do you think it could maybe survive if you were to move on from Tyreek Hill, if you were to maybe bring in like another physical, a real true X wide receiver? You have Jalen Waddle, you have Jonnu Smith, Devon Achane catching all these balls in the backfield. And one final note I have for you, man, if you want to talk about the model for success, how important it is to have your star players, it's more than a box score. A.J. Brown in the playoffs. Last week against Washington, 6 for 96, long of 31 and a touchdown. He went off. But I think we can also agree that Commander's secondary is pretty bad. The 2 previous weeks, both playoff games, 2 receptions for 14 yards and then 1 reception for 10 yards.
Yeah, and that was always that. I do think the offense, first, let me just say, I do think the offense can work if you move to a more traditional, big body guy, a boundary guy, like an A.J. Brown. I mean, that was a good trade that happened right after Tyreek Hill. And I thought to myself at the time, in my brain, I was just thinking, that might be more of a better receiver for what we needed, that big body at the time. But we understand why they did the timing stuff, why they use these quick receivers. But I would like to see him get back to that. And maybe, obviously, not getting A.J. Brown. There's names out there to look at. We'll talk about that in the draft and free agency. But yeah, man, getting a true X out there, a guy that's bigger body that can do different things. I mean, I said about the Spider-Man meme last week, that's Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill when they're both on the field. It looks like now it's just going to be Tyreek Hill. We like what we see from Malik Washington in the slot, but I'd love to get a big body on the outside and then let Jonnu Smith cook underneath, and you still got Devon Achane and some of those other players. So, I mean, it's hard not to get excited just saying your players out loud like that. Like I'm already getting excited for next season, and the season has not even ended yet.
I think that's kind of the issue the Dolphins ran into this year. They kind of got caught with their pants down. Obviously, you can't run the football. You lose someone like Robert Hunt. That's a huge issue. Then you just kind of got to go back to what was working. It's the same routes to Tyreek Hill. It's the same routes to Jalen Waddle. And when you're in year 3 of doing that same thing, it's just not going to work the same. And I think that's something to keep in mind. And I think we did see McDaniel try to do different things. So I saw some posts on Twitter where it's talking about the failures of the Dolphins. And there have been failures. You don't feel promising about the crew of Mike McDaniel and Chris Greer. There's a little bit of hope. Like you can see like there's the development. You see that Mike McDaniel wasn't just like his only thing wasn't speed. Like he didn't learn his entire coaching background is based on just needing 2 guys like this. You saw them do different things, and I think that's important to keep in mind. Chris Jones, Kansas City Chiefs, defensive tackle. He is playing in the Super Bowl. Is there any chance that Zach Sealer might be able to slide into?
I think so. I mean, when do they announce these officially? I feel like there's definitely a case for Zach Sealer to be in there, and he would probably be outside of Jonnu Smith. He probably would have been the only guy that really, I feel like, belonged in there. I mean, Devon Achane did some awesome things, but Jonnu Smith and Zach Sealer were really, the heart of, deserved it more than others. So yeah, I hope to see him there for sure, because it meant a lot to him too. I think he was another one that had his wife was tweeting it and things like that. I mean, it means so much more to these players than it does us fans, and I think I'm going to try to remember that next season.
How can you be Tyreek Hill walking around a locker room with Zach Sealer and Calais Campbell and say you don't have dogs? That is just, man, I can't get past the disrespect. Like he can say whatever he wants to the fans, and like he's going to, and he does. But like that's, I think that I'm stuck so hard on is the fact that Tyreek Hill says he deserves to feel this way and call out these people when you got Zach Sealer playing with like a broken face. Like it, I'm not gonna be able to get over that. I'm not gonna be able to get over that at all. Jason Sanders.
Yeah, he belongs there. I mean, yeah, I like Jason Sanders. We're really high on him right now, right? He's still got the money sign all off season long.
The money sign all off season. We might even should we be calling for that Sanders contract extension?
Oh God, yeah. I mean, he has all the records, right? I think he has like every franchise record. We're gonna need him moving forward.
The Miami Dolphins have hired a new wide receivers coach after letting go of Wes Welker, who joined the franchise with Mike McDaniel when he arrived. Josh, they have hired Robert Prince as their new wide receivers coach. I'm just going to set the tone. I want you to take me off this take. I don't care if it's Robert Prince. I don't care if it's Freddie Prince Jr. I don't think the Dolphins wide receiver coach matters at all. I don't think this is it.
I can't tell you that it means anything. I mean, we thought Wes Welker would have been the perfect coach, right? And besides fans saying, "Oh, let's bring Brian Hartline from Ohio State," I mean, I don't think that anybody had a real suggestion. But for a guy who has 32 years experience, I had to look it up. He also coached with Darrell Bevell back in Detroit in 2020, and he actually was able to call a game as a head coach. So that experience there, being able to call a game it was the COVID season. So, some teams had that emergency head coach, and he was one of them. So I'm intrigued by it. Intrigued is the only word I can use. 59 years old. The Cowboys have some decent receivers, but I don't know how much input he had with a CD Lamb, a Jalen Tolbert. I mean, we know Brandon Cooks was already established when he joined in 2022. So, I don't know, man. Again, like you said, I don't think that we're going to sit here and say this changed the Miami Dolphins. This would have been the difference of the 2024 season or anything like that. But I would love to see some of these younger guys, maybe an Eric Ezukama, someone again, get out in the field, man. Show that you belong out there, because that's not only Chris Greer decision. I'm sure Mike McDaniel had a large say in that. So intrigued. That's the only word I got.
Miami Dolphins receiving room, obviously Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle. You have Malik Washington. Eric Ezukama still hanging around. Is this signing, Josh? Is this a Tyreek Hill signing, or is this like an Eric Ezukama, Malik Washington, and even the players to be named later?
Yeah, we'll go with that. I think so. I think it's more of those guys down the line. And I think Tyreek Hill's on his way out. I mean, I was going to joke. Maybe some people rumored that maybe he'd go to the Cowboys. Maybe this is their way of setting that trade up, all jokes aside. But I'm here for it. Jake, any last thoughts on Robert Prince before we get into the other signing, which I know a lot of Dolphin fans were just waiting all season long for Danny Crossman to get that X?
Do I have any final thoughts on Robert Prince? I don't think so. I do think, Josh, that the Miami Dolphins receiving room, there needs to be some things figured out there. And I don't think we're talking enough about the fact that Odell Beckham Jr. was on the team. He got released from the team, and then he was never heard from again. Like, this was one of Miami's, like, you're our third guy. And we heard about so many meetings, Josh, between Mike McDaniel and Odell Beckham Jr. and explained how he's going to work in the system. Like, something needed to change in that room. I don't know if this is going to fix that, but it might be going that way. Josh, tell me about special teams. What we got going on?
Yeah, I wrote an article for the Finsider, so that's the only reason I know a single thing about Craig Ackerman. I should have even looked up how you said it. Special teams coordinator now for the Dolphins. He spent 6 seasons with Mike Vrabel in Tennessee. So I was joking, Jake, or at least in my first thought was, okay, maybe they're going to get some intel about Mike Vrabel and his coaching staff. But more importantly, man, this is a guy who was fired by Mike Vrabel in 2023, a Week 13 loss where his special teams unit, disarray at the end of the game, resulted in Mike Vrabel firing him. He sat out last season, but now he's joining the Miami Dolphins. And my only thought is, it has to be better than Danny Crossman. I love to hear, how he took last year off and, he got all these different ideas because, dude, our special teams just look lifeless, right? We saw no creativity like we saw years past. And if that's a little bit of what we're going to get from Craig Ackerman, I'm all for it. But again, just like the Prince signing, I don't know that I couldn't tell you. I couldn't have picked him out of the lineup, a few hours ago, to be completely honest.
Here's the difference between receiver and special teams, Josh. The Dolphins have some great special teams players. Jason Sanders, I think we can agree Malik Washington's kind of a stud back there. No, not you, Braxton Berrios. No. However, when you have a foundation like those two guys, Josh, you shouldn't be the worst special teams unit in the NFL. And for 3 straight years, the Miami Dolphins continued to be the worst special teams unit in the NFL. Crossman didn't change. He didn't adjust. There were actually, he brought in some special teams aces that only made things worse with Saran Neal and his personal foul penalties, which were absolutely awesome. However, when you look at moving forward, this is a Dolphins team that is on life alert. Like, there are flashing sirens that this ship is sinking. That iceberg, man, we hit the iceberg. You're not going to get somebody who has just been a top 5 special teams coordinator for the last 5 years. And I'm not here to blow smoke and say that Craig Ackerman, whatever it may be, is that guy. What I will say, the Dolphins need one thing from their special teams unit. Don't suck. Don't be the worst unit in the NFL. Everybody's so mad about this hiring. They're so mad, man. This was a special teams unit that ranked 15th and 17th and 22nd. That'd be awesome for the Dolphins, man. We were 32. We were 31. Seriously? We're going to be mad about this? Let's talk about the little tantrum that happened. On December 4th, 2023, Ackerman was fired following a disastrous 31-28 Week 13 overtime loss to the Colts. That game featured 2 consecutive Titans punts being blocked, at the first being returned for the touchdown, while the second resulted in a season-ending injury of punter Ryan Stonehouse in a critical missed extra point attempt. Part of these issues is because the punter gets hurt and you have Ryan Tannehill snapping the football. Bro, the kitchen was on fire. You're telling me they had a plan for when your punter gets hurt? Who has a plan for when their punter gets hurt? And we're going to be mad about that. As Dolphin fans, we are the ugliest special teams unit in the world. And we're going to be like, well, this guy on November 13th, he didn't have a plan in case his punter got hurt. So Danny Crossman's unit, he got hired to assistant head coach because of how good Matt Hawk was, because of how good Jason Sanders was. Like, again, I'm not trying to say this guy is awesome. Probably would have preferred someone like Darren Rizzi, someone who may talk yourselves into as the next head coach. But like, Jesus Christ, we're this upset about this signing, really?
Yeah, and it has to be because it's January 28th, right? There's nothing else to cry about. I mean, again, I don't feel one way or the other. And I mean, I do think I felt one way or the other towards Danny Crossman. I could not wait for him to be sent packing because part of you just want to see Mike McDaniel make that move. So I have no issues with either of these signs. I want to see if Ackerman, has learned from his past mistakes. Because like you said, man, you can't fault him for a punter. It's, injuries like that occurring, and just it seemed like he was almost the scapegoat or the fallback to Mike Vrabel trying to hang on for dear life. But Jake, do you think there's anything to that, him being with Mike Vrabel on his staff for 6 seasons? Do you think he has, I mean, he clearly has some type of intel, but do you think that, I'm definitely over hyping that more than I think I need to be. Do you agree with that? Do you feel like it's a non-issue? Okay, he was with Mike Vrabel for 6 seasons, or do you think, okay, there might be some secrets that he knows or learned along the way?
I think it's always important to talk about connections. I think it's always important to put that stuff out there. I think it's always important to put like the bias out there. I think when somebody's talking about sports, I'm not saying I like listening to Mike Greenberg. It's actually the opposite. But I think it's better that he tells us that he's, for some unknown reason, like this diehard Jets fan. I think it's more important to know that up front, because if you try to hide that, if you try to put your tie up, I think that stuff leaks out and then it looks disingenuous because it's there. So I'm all for saying like, hey, he knows Mike Vrabel. Let's see if he can get something out of it. Will it turn into something? Probably not. Danny Crossman was the special teams coordinator for the Bills. Nothing changed there. So probably not, but I do think it's important to talk about.
Yeah, and again, I don't know how much a special teams coordinator is going to really, change it. We're not looking back at 2024 again. Right, we're not saying if Danny Crossman wasn't the special teams coach, this Dolphins team is in the playoffs, right? Or do we? Yeah, no, we don't.
I think, Josh, what you said is best. You feel nothing. As a Dolphins fan, we're Dolphin fans. We feel nothing. We're dead inside. We just want to see what happens. I do think this just isn't like a whole like, oh man, LOL Fins. Like it's you had a deck of cards, you drew a card, and it wasn't the best card, but hey, it's a serviceable card. You need serviceable cards. I think that's important. A couple more notes here, Josh. Adam Schefter has said that Anthony Weaver impressed with his interviews with the Saints. Oh man, I think the other guy at ESPN. Oh, what's his name?
Mike McCarthy?
No, there's another guy at ESPN who brought up that Weaver interviewed well. And that's kind of our fear, is that the Dolphins will lose Anthony Weaver 1 year after starting to put together this defense that we were a little excited about. Josh, for our own selfish reasons, I don't think we want Weaver to get hired as for the person. You'd love to see it. You wouldn't say no to an opportunity like this. He's definitely deserving of an opportunity like this. But I just love the potential of what he could do with the Dolphins. And absolute worst case, if he was to wait 1 more year before leaving, we'd get a couple comp picks.
Yeah, and I mean, that's I think that's what some people first originally thought of. Okay, well, if we lose Anthony Weaver, we can get Robert Saleh, who's now with the San Francisco 49ers, and we get comp picks. And it was immediately shut down. No comp picks, and now Saleh signed. So I just keep thinking they'd be so Dolphins for this dude to, accept that head coaching job. But it's nice to hear that, he's getting his flowers, because even we as Dolphin fans, at least myself, I mean, I thought maybe he was, a guy that's a few years off, and that's not to say he still isn't a few years off, but to hear that he's interviewing really well, that he's a legit candidate against a Mike McCarthy, I believe is the other guy at New Orleans. I mean, it has to speak volumes to what Anthony Weaver is capable of, and, who the defense coordinators the Dolphins have if he does come back.
Yeah, it was Jeremy Fowler. Dolphins DC Anthony Weaver also has come up often as a candidate that's made a strong impression. That's following that Kellen Moore interviewed for that open Saints job, let's say Tuesday. So it would have been Monday night he interviewed for that job. And two, man, I wouldn't fault him if Weaver was to take that job. It makes a bunch of sense. And you got to consider, like, the Houston Texans just fired their offensive coordinator, Bobby Slowick, who a year ago was being talked about as that next offensive guru, the offensive mind. And then all of a sudden you get Tank Dell dealing with injuries. You get Stephon Diggs dealing with injuries. CJ Stroud, the more you play in the NFL, the more film opponents have on you. They're going to start to figure some things out. You have all those things go against the Texans, and they still kicked them to the curb. So you really got to take advantage of these opportunities, and I wouldn't wouldn't be hating on Weaver if he did end up with the Saints.
No, not at all. And that's kind of when I laughed when I think it was a report a few weeks ago where they said, he might still come back to Miami because he likes what they're building there. I mean, you only have one opportunity. You got to take it if it presents itself. Jake, I like what you wrote here, but I wrote an article for the Finsider. Reggie McKenzie, he's now gone from the Miami Dolphins. No complimentary pick because he is now a senior scout with the Tennessee Titans. He was a senior advisor with the Miami Dolphins. You asked me why he lost a critical piece to the Dolphins front office. And my original plan was, he was a general manager, right? I think he helped build the Raiders alongside Al Davis. So it was almost like you had this guy who was, filling up this one chair, but you had three general managers underneath one kind of umbrella. So I always viewed it as that. You had the guy who's been with other teams building, franchises, started with the Packers, then went to the Raiders and then the Dolphins, and now home with the Tennessee Titans. So that's why it kind of, I wasn't sad to hear that Reggie McKenzie left, but to hear that he's kind of getting a lateral move. And, now I want to know which guy you're promoting from within. We know Marvin Allen's the assistant GM. But yeah, good luck, Reggie McKenzie. I mean, I don't know that I feel either way about this. What about you, Jake?
I don't feel either way either. Josh, I think it'll be interesting to maybe come back to this when we start looking at like free agency and the draft. If the Dolphins develop any different habits, I don't think we'll necessarily see that, just because the Dolphins, I think from day one, have always been a team that's trying to walk in the same direction. You don't know if that's a good direction or a bad direction, but it's definitely one direction. Josh, why do you think he'd leave the Dolphins for a lateral move?
Yeah, good question. I think the biggest thing that I saw was it just seemed like Tennessee was his home, and that's kind of where he wanted to go. I think was it 69? Sorry, I don't have it in front of me, 66 or 69. So he's getting up there in age, and, maybe he sees an opportunity where, he can step into a bigger role, and maybe, the salary is a little bit different and this, that, and the other thing. And the Titans do have a high draft pick, so he's going to be tasked with, finding obviously the future signal caller there. So he probably just want to break free and go, try to help build his hometown team. At least that's how I view it.
Yeah, and I think he was even in the hunt for their GM job for a little bit as well. So I think there's a couple things here. I think coaches and GMs, you can tell when like this. We said it a couple times throughout the show, Josh. The sirens are on in Davie, Florida. The ship has sprung a leak. So you'd even wonder if it's as simple as like McKenzie's like, all right, like I know I'd be set for at least 2 years with the Titans compared to 1 year in Miami. It could be like as simple as that. So yeah, I'm not really looking at it one way or another. I think they'll be fun maybe to kind of come back to it and see if the Dolphins do anything a little different in the draft. Josh, Dolphins quarterback coach Darrell Bevel, who I always thought was a great player to have in the room. He was really involved with those Seahawks teams that just shocked the world year after year. He could be leaving the Dolphins to possibly reunite with Pete Carroll. He'd be promoted to offensive coordinator. This is one, Josh, where I couldn't tell you why, but I probably would be a little salty for. I just think that offensive room with you have McDaniel, Frank Smith, and Darrell Bevel. I just think there's so much knowledge there and so much value in having that knowledge.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it was kind of like the McKenzie theory where you just have all these guys with all this knowledge who are former GMs, the more brains, the better. I mean, this was a guy who was, with Seattle, like you mentioned, and had great success there. So I would hate this because I did write an article when he was up for the Cleveland Browns offense coordinator position, and it sounded like him and Tua Tagovailoa had one hell of a relationship. So I think it would really hurt the room. And again, who's to say that, what he brings to the table, right? I think there was one point where some people said, get rid of Frank Smith and promote Darrell Bevel if that's what you have to do to keep him around. I don't know if I'd go that extreme, but I do feel like, McDaniel, Frank Smith, Darrell Bevel, those guys, the three-headed monster, so to speak. I think, we might see a drop-off if he weren't to stick around. But he loves Pete Carroll, man, and that was a little bit of a surprise signing to me with the Raiders. What were your thoughts on that, going the Pete Carroll direction? I mean, threw me off a little bit.
Pete Carroll, Tom Brady, man, what – I think their new GM has the word spy in his last name. I mean, I'm all for it, man. And they're all the way on the other coast. I'm excited to see how that goes. I didn't expect it, but I also didn't expect, Josh. Were you surprised? The Dolphins finished the year 8-9. Are you surprised that they're this engaged with the coaching carousel?
No, I guess not. I think a lot of people maybe we as fans it's hard to overlook this past season because it's so fresh in our memory. But I think, they look at the entire resume, so to speak, something that us fans, we're just so spur of the moment. This dude sucks. Who cares what he did a few years ago? I think the NFL is a little bit more wise to that, and relationships mean everything, right?
And we're Dolphin fans. The final note here,
of course,
if Anthony Weaver was to leave, we're kind of hoping he waits one more year. Ignore the comp picks, ignore everything else. But man, Outside linebacking coach Ryan Crow is talk of the town. He met with the Patriots about their open defensive coordinator role. He didn't get that job, but it made sense. He spent 6 seasons with Vrabel and the Titans. That makes a lot of sense. But now he's also meeting with the Dallas Cowboys for their defensive coordinator position. Josh, you mentioned that relationships are everything. I didn't see any link here, and that's concerning. That makes me, if there's no connection, no link, I want to hold on to this guy for one more year in case Weaver goes and make him the next defensive coordinator. I have nothing to justify that outside of the interest from another team, and my dumb brain, that's enough for me.
No, that's enough for me too. And I remember when Ryan Crow signed, I think there was a video going around from one of his, I don't know if it's like a high school, meeting or whatever it was, but he was, this rah guy that, a lot of fans were getting hyped about. So I could see why, maybe that, is intriguing to some teams. And I mean, what he's done with the edge position, right? So I would rather see him stick around, would rather not see him with the New England Patriots, but you got to respect him if he can move up the ladder, because I feel like it was just a few years ago when he came in and now he's already, being interviewed for different positions. I mean, testament to how quickly he can climb those ranks and what these NFL teams think of him.
The Dolphins haven't played in a month, and we still got you 45 minutes. Thank you all so much for listening to another Dolphins podcast. We try to keep it moving with about 2 shows a week during the off season. The days are going to vary a little bit, so the best way to stay engaged with the show and involved is to make sure you are subscribed. We're on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. And 2, we are also on the 560 WQAM YouTube channel. I know I mentioned this a lot, but I do read the comments in there on some of our recent videos. We have been getting a boatload, so we're going to be doing a mailbag soon, I promise. We love everybody who engages with us. Thank you all so much for listening. We will be back later this week, but until then, fins up.
Fins up.
Zoop.